Welcome to A Breath of Fresh Career. This is season 2, episode 9. Justin Kane, the host. I am joined here by Robert Hess. Robert, I've known Robert for many years. I want to say that he and I first met during his triad days, but it actually might have been his 24/7 Real Media days. Robert, he's got 2 kids. He's a Chicago native, 2 kids in college. I want to say one's a junior, one's a freshman. The guy loves learning about new technology that's kind of hitting the market. In fact, oftentimes when I get a new client company in a search, I call Robert to kind of get his take on the industry, on the technology. This guy is everything: strategy, product, sales, partnerships. He's just an all-around great guy. And today we're going to be talking about what I think is a really, really misunderstood and important topic about data and cookie data, largely focused on consumer data or just like data and marketing data. What cookies mean, the difference between third-party cookies, first-party cookies, and now what people are calling zero-party cookies. Welcome, Robert, to A Breath of Fresh Career. I'm psyched to have you out here.
Thanks, Justin. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's, if you're cool with it, man, let's just jump right into it. Tell us about data. See, cookies have really long enabled companies to track their customers' web activity and then use that data to personalize ads and product offerings. So if you could just take us back, tell us about data, tell us about cookies, what they are, how they work, and essentially why and how they're used, et cetera. Is that cool?
That's great. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I think cookies themselves are just a small piece of code that's associated with an individual browser on your computer, a web browser. So the technology itself is not nearly as nefarious as the bigger picture and context of what it's come to represent, because when you put that piece of code on a browser and write a piece of information to it, it's so that you can retrieve it and, personalize the web page with it. Or, there are a lot of uses that are considered very wonderful conveniences of being on the internet. What has become kind of the nefarious side of usage, or at least from a consumer perspective, is that advertisers have used them to find the audiences that they want to reach and then measure the effectiveness of ads. So what I would like to maybe back up just for a second to think about is kind of, even when you're off of the internet, when you're not on your computer, when you go downtown to a store and do business with a company, right? If you have to go to the local Ace Hardware and you want to buy a new blade for your chainsaw, then they're going to keep a receipt of that, right? I'm maybe picking a specific brand, but if they tell you you have to have it shipped to you, you have no problem giving them your address and receiving it in the mail in a few days. But all of the data that you give them, right? The brand of chainsaw that you have, the credit card that you pay it with, the home address that you want it shipped to, it's an exchange of information used to do business with the brand. And we've all managed to have information given to brands over the years to do business with them, whether it's doing a mortgage with your bank, or a card with the gas station, or going to the grocery store and buying particular products. So the offline exchange of information to do business with brands is very common and very accepted. And, where it gets to be a little bit different, or the third player that gets introduced into the ecosystem, is when those brands want to speak to their customers and prospects, they advertise. And, we've seen it before the internet and linear TV and radio and, even outdoor, but we get a lot of free content presented to us in the context of being okay with seeing paid ads around that content. So the value exchange of watching or seeing or having ads presented in the middle of content It's just the value exchange of what the publishers go through to create content. And I guess, publishers today don't all look the same as they used to. So, we could recognize a publisher before by their very traditional publishing name, like Wall Street Journal or USA Today or CBS or ABC, right? And publishers today on the internet look a lot different. There's publishers like BuzzFeed. There's publishers that are aggregators of other people's content. There's publishers who show streaming video content, but all of the same exchange occurs, that brands are willing to pay to put ads around that content so that you can enjoy it for free. And we all love free content, right? Who wants to put down a credit card to watch or read an article that they, have traditionally received for free? And so, when it's all working, it works very well. But what does working mean on the internet, right? That's the point where measurement becomes even greater on the digital platforms than it was on offline platforms, because most offline platforms didn't have all the capability of creating data trails to measure whether people saw an ad, responded to an ad, visited a website, engaged with content on that website, or went through various levels of commitment to showing a brand that they're interested in their goods and services. And so all of those measurements take place in cookies. And the cookies are really no more than an identification of a particular browser, being a specific browser by number,
like
not by
Chrome,
name.
as an example.
Exactly, or Safari, right? And it's by name and number. So there's an IP address, there's a browser ID, and over time that cookie has a number in it, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the combination of the IP address, the cookie number, and the browser ID become encouragement to the brand that somebody who saw the ad went to their website and bought a product. And all of that is called digital attribution, and it gets a lot more complex than that. But the reality is that there's two types of cookies in browsers: the ones that brands write themselves when you're on their website, and the ones that publishers write on their websites, which are also considered first party. And then there's all of the supporting cast of characters that are providing technology to help brands and publishers present these wonderful, rich online environments. And those technologies are typically third-party companies that do different types of analysis or measurement of the effectiveness of ads, or the visibility of ads, or the serving of ads. And when somebody writes a cookie that is not the site that you're on, that is considered a third-party cookie.
Okay, let me stop you there for 1 second, because this is interesting. So you're saying that first-party cookie data comes from the actual site that you're visiting, right? And or information that you entered into that site specifically. Where third-party cookies come in is when a technology company essentially creates that data and shares it with a publisher or advertiser. Is that netted out?
It's a little bit. It's a hard line, but it's trying to take it out of data for a second, right? You're absolutely right in first and third party data being collected by or appended by first or third parties. But the technology itself, the cookie, as it's known on the browser, is in the first party if the domain writing the cookie is the domain that you're on. And it's third party if the domain writing the cookie is not the domain that you're on. So we'll just pick on Google for a second. They have a very big advertising business, and Google provides free services and tools for a lot of brands and publishers. And Google has a domain associated with those technologies called ads.google.com. So if you're on the Wall Street Journal and Google writes a cookie, that is a third-party cookie. It doesn't mean that Google's adding any data into the equation. It just means that the cookie being written is being written by someone other than the site that you're on.
I got it. Okay. Makes total sense. Now, we're talking third party, we're talking first party, pretty clear. Appreciate the clarification on that. You know, I read a Harvard Business Review in April of this year article about zero party cookies. Do you know anything about zero party cookies in the future? And I've even done some like Googling to find, you know, zero party technology companies out there. What do you know?
Yeah. Well, it carries into that bigger story, right? This exchange of free content for ads becomes really great while it works. But when it doesn't work, we start to say, you know, why are consumers now trying to change the way that the model works? And when you say that consumers have become concerned about their privacy, or they're no longer willing to exchange ad views, effective or efficient ad views for content, then the argument, or at least some people have said, you know, our goal should be to just pay the consumer for the data. And that's what really zero party has. I don't understand why they came up with the term zero or why they're using it, but the reality of saying to a consumer, tell me some things about you that you don't mind telling me in exchange for money, and then I'll use those things to serve ads. And there have been a lot of companies out there trying to figure out a value exchange that included in that triangle between brands and publishers and consumers, a way to pay consumers, whether it be with micro subscription access to a single story instead of buying a full annual subscription, or paying someone in gift card value over time for free coffee.
You know, online rebate, in-store rebates, those kind of things.
Right. So there have been a number of companies saying, let's figure out a better model to pay consumers
Virtual
for the data.
currency.
Right. And, you know, that doesn't change, though, the reality of the model of consumers having given a brand first-party data. We've all done it on our mortgage, right? We gave our address and a lot of information to get our land title, and we've done the same thing to get our car title, and we've done the same thing when we buy the branded clothes that we wear. So, you know, brands still know that when they are able to speak to their current customers and prospective customers intelligently, that the effectiveness of their advertisements over time is better than untargeted ads. So data-driven advertising is proven more effective. And that even goes back to the days of direct mail, right? There are great big data companies out there that have every name and address of every household in the United States appended with data, and sell lists to send direct mails into consumer households.
American Family Insurance, you know,
right?
Essentially. Right.
So you see all that happening. And, you know, on the internet, it seems like where we have ended up is this desire for consumers to all of a sudden put ad blockers in and go through this purging of cookies on a weekly basis, which they've been told is, you know, in the interest of their privacy at the, you know, that the nefarious advertisers are tracking them to the end of the earth to serve them an ad that they don't want to see. And, you know, the reality is, the other way that it could all work is they could pay for all the content that it costs to create the content. all the musicians, all of the movies, all of the videos, all of the articles and stories. It takes money to produce that. And the value exchange has always been, pay a subscription and see no ads or
right. Like Pandora as an example, you pay the subscription, you see no ads. Yeah. You know, what's interesting about what you're saying is, for the most part, I want a personalized online experience, right? Based on, everything that I'm interested in: hockey, mountain biking, golf, chainsawing, like that kind of stuff. Like I want my experience, to online, on mobile, to be targeted to me and who I am and what I do. I like nice clothes, et cetera, right? Where the creep factor comes in a little bit is like when, we're over here talking about chainsaw blades, and then, you get advertisements from Still or Husqvarna chainsaws on Facebook. That gets a little, I don't know. It just makes you feel a little bit too close to, like, people are listening. They're listening somehow. There's something going on. They're tracking me somehow. I mean, granted, it's probably the future, but it's definitely part of the future. But I know that a lot of these larger technology companies, right, out here are, thinking about different ways to leverage customer information and knock, knock, the cookie monster has left the building, right? I mean, Google,
right.
What has Google threatened to do, and how is that going to essentially impact cookies?
Right.
What's in the
a
news?
Great question. Yeah. The reality is that going forward, the mechanisms which the data-driven ad industry has utilized to carry targeting or views or responses back and forth has been the third-party cookie. And Google has announced, following Safari's announcement a couple of years ago, that next year, starting this April and throughout the remaining year, they will no longer allow the browser to write third-party cookies. So the cookies written by the sites you're on, the first-party cookies, will still be there, and they will still be able to choose to write data into cookies when you're on their sites for publishers or brands. Ironically, Google managed to do a little switcheroo during the change of their event tags. So there used to be a tag that Google gave for free to everybody to measure effectiveness of ads, and they switched it from third party to first party. So their own platform has a container tag, which used to be called the Google Ad Manager tag, that converts all the publishers and brands cookies to first party, or all of the Google cookies to first party. So of course they're telling brands and publishers, just use my tools, use my browser, buy my inventory, use my measurement and attribution services. And, of course, at the end, it's going to tell you, I know this is shocking, buy more Google.
Yeah, exactly. For our listeners out there, you guys can all tell that this guy is an encyclopedia, right? Robert is kind of the encyclopedia. When you open the encyclopedia, the cookies and data, there's a picture of Robert Hess. This guy knows it. He studies it and everything. I got to ask you to keep focused on a breath of fresh career. How'd you get your start doing it? How'd you get into this stuff?
Sure. So I grew up in a newspaper business. I grew up in the media side of life. My grandfather was a publisher in Oklahoma. He brought the first offset printing press into the state of Oklahoma at the Pauls Valley Daily Democrat, which was the paper he owned when I was born, but he had 7 papers there in Oklahoma. He's in the Oklahoma Journalism Hall of Fame. And after working on a farm for a while, I about my sophomore year in high school, went to work in town at my grandfather's newspaper. And I drifted into the ad department because they got to leave the building. right? The editorial guys stayed at their desk and the ad guys left the building all the time. So
Okay.
I kind of started working in the ad business, just working at my grandfather's newspaper.
To go to local Oklahoma-based businesses to advertise in the Republican.
Yeah, in
wow.
in Cordell Beacon, yeah. And so, you know, and from there I went to the university and got a journalism degree with an advertising emphasis or focus. Then I moved out to San Diego for 11 years. And yeah, before I actually left, though, I helped my grandfather convert all of his old print materials that were film-based to this new thing called the Macintosh computer, which was 1984. They had come up with the Mac and created PageMaker and started printing out strips of editorial content instead of having to develop film. So, you know, I always had a bent to try to push towards modernization of the business, if you will. So I helped Grandpa convert to pre-press technologies that were electronic. And then I moved out to San Diego and helped the paper out there launch the first website of the paper. So I was in San Diego County for 11 years in North County at the North County Times, which when I first went there was the Blade Tribune, but we put our first website up there. And then I came back to Chicago. Well, I married a girl from Chicago and we moved back, and I went to work at the Sun Times and helped them do their first digital classified section. So I've always been kind of leaning towards the digital side of the newspaper business.
But tied into advertising for sure. As you said, you know, you ventured into the advertising department because they got to leave the building. So Grandpa, right? Paper, you know, advertising, you know, looking back at all that, we always think about like, man, if I knew this, you know, I'd be sitting on an island right now. I always tell the story. I lived out in Colorado in like 1999, and I was driving down. I think it was 70. I always forget the name of the route. I-74, maybe I-75. It went from like Denver to you know, south Colorado all the way down to Colorado Springs and through. And there were always signs on the side of the road that said like, you know, 30 acres, $30,000, you know, and I was making like, I don't know, 60,000 or 70,000. Right. What I really should have done is said, okay, I'm going to live off ramen noodles for a year. I'm going to go to one of these farmers, buy 60 acres for 50 grand cash, you know, and then I'd be sitting on an island. But what's one thing you wish you had known when you got into this business?
To not sell my house in San Diego based on that story.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
But we did. When we moved back, I should have kept it. But no, I guess when I think back, look, we all come out of college with a view of what's important and, you know, the mountains that we want to conquer. And certainly, I think part of what we don't show, we like to show a lot of strength, especially in the sales department. We're a bunch of type A personalities that love to, you know, get it done and hit our goals and set records and win contests. But, you know, that vulnerability of being able to ask for help, and saying earlier in my career, just, you know, slow down and ask for help, because you don't have to know it all. You don't have to win every contest. You don't have to be the type A person in every single situation. So I guess that would be, you know, what I would say, be a little humble, ask for help. Is this
directed towards me at all, Robert?
No, it's directed towards life in general. No,
I love it. But that's definitely something that I got to, I love winning, and I love, you know, I love it. I love the challenge. You know, so along those lines of advice, you know, if you were to be sitting down, and by the way, your son, freshman in college, you were telling me a story last week about something he's doing tied into advertising now, and we could talk about that in 1 second. But if you were to sit down with him, and he's obviously showing interest in a very similar, which is a lot different than it was when you started, right? And even when he graduates in 4 years, 3 years, it'll be a lot different than it is today. What type of advice would you give somebody who is looking to kind of follow in your footsteps and get into a career like yours?
I would say take a lot of math, right? There is a lot of math involved in advertising. The reality of statistics and business and the big data that's driven the business, not just for advertising, but also for content. Like that was probably one thing I should say about the data really quickly is that it's not just impacting the ad department, right? The data is impacting the entire enterprise. So it's deciding whether, we need to make more snow blowers or less snow blowers based on how many snow blowers we sold this year, or predictions of weather based on weather data for next year, and whether we should, double up the quantity in North Dakota versus sending none of them to Florida. Like data impacts the entire enterprise, right? And
I don't need data or technology to tell me not to send a snowblower to Florida.
Yeah, sometimes you'll find them on the shelf there. You never know. But the reality is that this enterprise level data infrastructure is impacting the world we live in. Big data, statistics, AI, machine learning, all of those things become the future of driving organizations' intelligence. And it's not just the consumer data used for advertising. It's kind of understanding the bigger picture of how data impacts the entire organization.
I always ask a question. It's pretty interesting. You brought up your grandfather. I'm anticipating that when I ask this question, he's definitely going to be one of the 3 people that are most influential in your life. But if not, I'd love to hear about some of the 3 people that have been most influential in your life. I mean, my grandfather certainly was also. Grandpa Joe, the guy could do anything. He could do anything. He could fix anything. He could do anything. If he didn't have a tool for something, he created it. I think about him all the time, daily. I think about my grandmother as well. But tell me about 3 people that have been most influential in your career, in your life.
Sure. Yes. My grandfather was one. Obviously, I was working on the farms, doing a lot of manual farm work, and just found that I wanted to go in and try working in town for the summer, because it seemed on the Mondays at schools, the kids that spent the weekend in town, where their stories were a lot better than those of us who had baled hay from sun up to sundown, right? So I tried that out, and it turned out that, my grandfather was a source of inspiration for a lot of character building guidance in my life. He told me how to work hard. He told me how to, have integrity. He told me how to be humble about your accomplishments. And he taught me to pay it forward. Like a lot of the things I get involved with today are me in the back of my mind thinking, Grandpa B would recommend that you pay it forward right here. So, if I get involved in a request by someone to, step in and be of service, it's generally thinking about him telling me that was what we should all do with most of our energy. So Grandpa B. My second would be my first boss out of college, my publisher at the paper in San Diego, Tom Misses. He was a Southern gentleman from Norfolk, Virginia, who had that big drawl that was so fun and entertaining to listen to. Clients loved to hear him tell a story, but he taught me how to sell. And, he taught me how to listen. He used to do it with colloquialisms like selling ain't telling, it's listening, right? He had 1,000 of those. He'd walk through the office on Monday morning about 11 o'clock and go, if you don't have anything to do, don't do it here. Like, as in gold's in the street, get out of the office. But, you know, in between all of those mantras and colloquialisms, he really taught me how to understand what clients were trying to get out of any given sales situation, and to listen to clients and find the ones that were going to make their bonus or get promoted or have their needs met by the solution that you had to offer them. And, you know, he would tell me, I remember coming back once to the office with a story about a company that was going to impact our revenue significantly. I was afraid, because back then I was filled with fear about things like economic security through clients increasing or decreasing their budget, right? But I was afraid that the impact of a particular competitor's presence in our market was going to have up to a 20% negative impact on our revenue, because the mantra was this company had come into different markets telling newspaper Sunday advertisers that they could cut 20% efficiencies out of their newspaper buy that was just pure waste. And as I was telling Tom about this company and what they were doing, and they're here, they're just around the corner, they're going to be here they'll be calling our advertisers tomorrow. And his question was, well, who owns that company? And, you know, I had asked a lot of questions. I hadn't asked who owns that company. And he picked up the phone and talked to the owner and figured out a way to work with and create and minimize the impact of their presence. But I always remembered the questions he asked. I think that's what he taught me as a mentor, was to ask the right questions, not get caught up in the questions that you think you ought to be asking.
Okay. You know, so that's very interesting. So there was a company, was it a technology company? What was the company that was, that you felt was going to be impactful?
Yeah, it was a technology, well, sort of technology, if direct mail back then could be technology, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
You know, it was a company that was trying to give 100% market coverage to direct mail, through direct mail, to the people who were putting their inserts, which are the folded ads that appear in the Sunday paper, right?
We're talking about targeting. We're talking about targeting, you know, and it's unbelievable through ads. It's amazing. What, right there, you know, you're selling advertisement in newspapers. It's your life. It's what you do. It's what you kind of came up doing with Grandpa. You know, and it's new. It was new in the industry. What do you see?
Do you want? I'm sorry. I was just going to drop my third person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to neglect to make sure I say it, but no, my wife is my
very important
inspiring person in my life. Right. She probably has done more impressive things in our business than I have. She ran an agency that did first run film marketing. And she was very instrumental in helping me to achieve success in my first company by convincing the studios in Los Angeles to look at the San Diego County market a little bit differently than they had in the past. And, you know, she came to Chicago to open an agency to handle the Warner Brothers account, and ended up handling pretty much everything but New Line and Disney. And she sold that agency when our kids were about 4 years old to, you know, spend the rest of their young lives as a stay-at-home mother. But that would be the third person in my life.
That's amazing. So I don't know if I knew that your wife was kind of in the industry as well. So you guys are kind of like the two-man team over there, which is really cool. You know, we talk about zero party data and technology companies that are focusing on it. We're talking about direct mail as something new that was coming around the corner, literally after your advertisers. What are you seeing in the industry? What's next? What's big out there?
I still think that the usage of first party data is really important for both brands and publishers. It's just important for them to do it in a safe and private way on their own sites or with really trusted partners. So the next rise, you mentioned first and third party cookies, but this in between land of second party cookies. If a publisher knows you from the registration data that you've given them, and a brand knows you from the shopping history that you've given them, together they have a view that makes a second party view. And generally that second party view of a consumer is more holistic than either of their first party view of you. So, you know, I think that second party combinations of data in safe and controlled ways are very much around the corner. And I think what I mean by safe and controlled ways is that these brands and publishers are starting to build their own data infrastructure products instead of trusting external data infrastructure products like the free ones that Google always wants you to use, or the ones in the market that have to use third-party cookies to carry things around the internet. So I see a lot of brands and publishers talking about the next 5 years being a path towards their own controlled data infrastructure products.
Wow. Okay. Are you working on any of that? Because I know you work with some companies, both technology and B2C focused companies. Are you working on any other projects, any special projects that are tied into any of that?
Sure. I've had an opportunity to do some consulting projects this year that have helped me evaluate and assess brands and publishers' current first-party data collection status, I guess is the best word. Like, where are we today, right? And what is our risk going forward if we don't do anything and Google takes away third-party cookies? And are we future-proofed? Will our business next year be at risk if we don't make some changes? What should those changes be? And you know, what is the best path forward? And you know, there's a lot of noise in the industry. So having the perspective of years of working with brands and publishers on first-party data value, I think adds a unique perspective to the projects that I get invited to be a part of. But I've done 2 or 3 of them this year, looking at specific ad tech targets of venture capital to see how future-proof they are, and to help some brands and publishers future-proof, or at least think about the path towards future-proofing.
Yeah, what's coming down the pike. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And then other than that, I've been doing some volunteer things that are kind of cool. I do mentor at 1871, which is Chicago's startup incubator that it wasn't our governor when I first started mentoring at 1871, but Pritzker has become our governor in the last couple of years. But he's been running this incubator in the Mart of Chicago for probably the last 10 years. I've been a mentor for the last 8 or 9, and I get to talk to young entrepreneurs and hear their ideas and think about, you know, strategy for growth, or strategies for monetization, or strategies for building out their sales team, and when to hire support, and when to market it, and when to call it a product, and when to support it as a full product. So that volunteering with the 1871 incubator it keeps me fresh and young, right? To hear new ideas from new entrepreneurs every month. I do that a lot. I also go down.
Relevant. It's so relevant. I mean, 1871 is the year that Great Fire happened in Chicago, and there was essentially a revolution for the city of Chicago, right? Because this fire happened, and what it did was it brought all these engineers and builders and, you know, architects together to forge this new, the new city. which is pretty
Right.
unique. That is really cool. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that at some point, but that's great. So so 1871 is
Right.
is it an incubator for technology companies primarily, or is it, so it's right up your alley?
Yes. It's tech companies, and they range not just advertising. I've talked
Right.
to carpenter, how do we disrupt the contracting business for carpentry projects and all the OSHA technology requirements around paperwork. So it's not just tech for advertising or tech for publishers. I also do, though, go back to my school. The journalism school at the University of Oklahoma has a top 10 advertising program in the country. It's called the Gaylord College of Mass Communication. And I've been on the board of visitors, which really is just an adult or a alumni board that comes back on an annual basis twice a year. We look at changes to curriculum or listen to professors and their initiatives and, kind of give them guidance about whether that degree program is going to prepare the students for a future in the world of advertising once they, or journalism, once they leave the university. And so I've been doing that also. And my favorite part of doing that is when I go down, if I go a day early, I get to go into a classroom and present something about digital strategy or digital innovation to the students. And, we also get to meet with the students and help them go through mock interviews or update their resumes or help them kind of be prepared to go out and do an interview and be confident in the resume and the materials that they're presenting when they first start their journey into the land of lifetime careers coming out of the university.
Wow. Paying it forward, man, and giving back. I love it. We talked a little bit about advice. We talked a little bit about, one thing you wish you knew before you began your career, but let's just talk about overall Robert Hess advice that you can give listeners about life, about work, about entrepreneurship, etc. Like you're right in the middle of this, man. So what advice can you give some of our listeners?
I would say just be a lifelong learner, right? I think that's probably part of my personality, but I always try to be taking on something new that helps challenge me. The other thing is to reflect instead of react. I think that I heard this great quote the other day that was, we are the most over-informed and under-reflected society in the history of mankind. When you think about that for a minute, right? We have so much information at our fingertips, and yet we just react all day long. And if we just pause and reflect instead of react, that leads to better outcomes, at least in my life. And so, being present in the moment, being humble, being, not, I guess, humble. I was thinking about dropping that word, but that the reality is, I've come to an understanding of humility, not as thinking less of myself, but of thinking of myself less often, right? And so if I can just continue to put the needs of others and be of service in ways that I can, pay it forward, according to Grandpa B, in all aspects of being present, right? Then the rest kind of works itself out. And that's what I meant, I guess, about the mountain that I was chasing when I first came out of college versus what I really find important today. It's definitely changed, and that's okay. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen over time, right? If we stop changing, that's when we need to be worried.
Yeah, man, that's deep. That's great. I always ask this question: if you were in my shoes about this specific interview, this podcast, is there anything that you would have asked yourself that I didn't?
I guess as to the bigger context of all the data and cookies, right? We've kind of blown it all up at this point, right? I saw, if you think about Apple and Facebook and Google all fighting in the name of privacy, blowing up the rest of the open web system for doing digital advertising in a data-driven fashion. You know, if it was so broken to begin with, then, you know, what could we rebuild? Like, starting with a blank slate, what's the best way to rebuild it so that consumers lean in, brands lean in, publishers lean in, and everybody has the ability to create environments of great content for consumers that are able to tell them about products and services that might be of interest to them, that actually work, that are meaningful and productive and time saving in their life, and not be, you know, seen as the bane of everyone's existence, because the model over time has proven effective throughout history and throughout different mediums. So, you know, I guess ultimately asking ourselves, how could we rebuild it going forward in a better way?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, my mind is running right now with regards to ideas around that. We should talk offline about a couple of them. Because if there's a guy that could set the direction in the course, it's you. In closing, man, first of all, I really appreciate all the information. I appreciate the intimate stories you've shared. I'm really excited that, you know, we didn't forget to talk about your wife and how influential she's been, because last thing I want to do is have you hear it when she listens to this. But where is it best for listeners to connect with you online?
No, I'm on LinkedIn. I can be reached by email at info@maromapartners.com. Okay. But, you know, on LinkedIn, I've got my own personal profile, and I have a profile for the consulting brand that I've been operating, which, you know, I've invested in a couple of small startup pre-revenue stage companies that I've met through 1871, and, you know, continue to do consulting for different consulting firms outside of that. So Maroma Partners is my current LinkedIn company, and info@maromapartners.com.
Okay. I'll put both the link to your LinkedIn profile as well as the email address that you shared. Okay. In the text and body of this, not only the video on YouTube, but also the podcast. So, Robert, this has been great. I appreciate you. I appreciate this time, and thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, the feeling's mutual, Justin. I really appreciate that you do this to pay it forward yourself to others. I know you have a big heart of service and want to help as many people as you can. So always happy to do anything to help you serve that purpose.
Thanks. I ask that you share this out there. Let's help educate people on cookies and data, and you know, and what you're doing with you know, for folks that are in Chicago with 1871 and or in Illinois, I should say. But yeah, I'll shoot you a quick note when this is up and live. You can share it with your community. I appreciate it, Robert. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Justin.
All right.
Bye-bye.